Hello, and welcome to the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. This podcast will show you how to achieve FI through entrepreneurial pursuits by developing a well-calibrated and thought-out plan for risk management so that you can maximize the rewards.
Hosted by certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and serial entrepreneur Ben Martinek, this is the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of the content is presented as investment advice. Consult your financial professional before acting on any of the information presented in this show. Hello and welcome. This is Ben Martinek with the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. I'm joined today with my great co-host, Andrew Bencivenga. Andrew, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Glad to be here.
Yeah, we have got a fascinating topic, Andrew. I really love this one. This is a segment for a movie that we watched here recently called The Alpinist, which is we watched it on Netflix, everybody, and it's really fascinating. If you have a few hours to kill and you're looking for a little change of pace from some of what you might typically see on Netflix, would highly recommend you take some time and watch this. It's about the life and story of a young gentleman. His name is Marc-Andre Leclerc. I think I got that right, Andrew? Leclerc, not Leclerc?
You got it. My coaching paid off.
Okay, good. Awesome. No, Marc-Andre, we just call him Marc-Andre for short. He's a Canadian who was very large in the Alpinist community. Unfortunately, he did pass a few years back due to some of his pursuits, but the movie was about it was just about his rock climbing and the risk that he would take. And it's really a gripping show. And I just was blown away with it. Deb and I watched it together. We were blown away with it. It was really riveting, really riveting. Like, it was terrifying to watch just through video camera some of the stuff that he was doing. And you were just taken back, shocked. I don't know. I mean, just left speechless, really. I know that you had watched it, Andrew, after I had shared some encouragement to do so. What were some of your takeaways as you watched the show? Did you find it to be a worthwhile passing of your time?
Oh, yeah. I'm the kind of guy that can never watch a movie straight through. You know, I'll watch 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. But this movie actually kept me glued to my chair for, I think it took me like 3 viewings.
Okay. Pretty good.
Which is really, it's very good. It's a testament to the movie. But yeah, I mean, you just see him. The cinematography is amazing. I think they shot a lot of it with drones, and then other parts, they were like right next to him on the rock face. But he is solo climbing, free climbing, no ropes, just up these mixed, I think they called it like mixed medium rock faces. So like some of it's rock, some of it's ice. The ice is crumbling and falling all over him, and he's switching shoes in the middle of a climb, and it's really riveting stuff. Also, they do a great job of getting into the philosophy of it all and talking to the people that were close to him. And for something that Ben and I spend most of our days in front of a desk, to see something like this and really see a different perception of what the world can be and the risk that's inherent in this pursuit was really very interesting.
Yes, for sure. I think for everybody who's not familiar with the term alpinist, I mean, this is really just people who do rock climbing for a living. And, there's different ways to do rock climbing. I don't have any experience with this, so I'm just talking as an observer to it. Although I do find rock climbing pretty fascinating. But, obviously you could go up and climb a mountain that's already been pre-routed, and you have your ropes and safety gear, and usually a number of other people going along with you and coaching you up it. And so it's, I'm sure, a very physical, challenging activity that has its own adrenaline rush, but relatively tame and safe in that one end of the spectrum for what you're doing. This story of Marc-Andre, who was a rock climber who was really on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, going up solo, which is largely unheard of and undone. Like, there is no other support, no one else. He's going up on his own. He's not taking a predetermined route. I mean, he's planned out maybe a route of what he thinks the best way to, climb this wall, this mountain is. And, some of this is just sheer cliffs, but he's going up and finding crevices, little cracks in the rock face to pull himself up. So, I mean, he's going up with his gear, but he's not doing it with any ropes or any safety gear. I mean, what do they call it? Free handling it? I mean, he's like there is nothing else.
I think they call it, free soloing?
Yeah, free solo.
We should know this after both having watched the movie. Free climbing, maybe?
Yeah. This is just amazing. Can you imagine climbing up the side of a wall, a rock, just with your hands and your feet? I mean, nothing else to pull you up. And at times, I mean, the shots that were just the most remarkable was when he was using these crack-ons, like little ice dagger
Crampons?
crap-ons. Is that what they are? You like look at that photos. I mean, you can just tell how much you're not rock climbers, but like they're ice.
Ice axes,
There you
fixes.
go. Yeah, ice diggers. I mean, they're basically like footholds for going up in ice. You take the sharp end of the axe and you ram it into the ice, and then you hold on to it, and it bites in. And
And you hope it stays, right?
like
Yeah.
he would be making these adjustments. Like he would be dangling, like literally, folks. I hope you just have to watch this to really see it. But he would be dangling on the side of a cliff with nothing below him, only attached to this cliff with this ice axe with one hand.
Yeah, yeah.
While he's making some sort of adjustment, his other hand is being utilized, and he doesn't have his feet on anything. Like he's just holding on, and he's not like 10 feet up, people. I mean, he's 1,000 feet up in the air. Like if he lost his grip, it was a complete free fall. Like he's done. Like, I mean, you're not surviving. You're not surviving that. And so, why are we talking about this on the FI Entrepreneur, financial planning for the risk taker? This is incredible risk, like just incredible risk that this young gentleman is taking. And what we really want to do is just talk about it because, there's different takes to say, I mean, should you even really put your life maybe at stake like that? One might wonder, like, is this a good decision? He obviously clearly felt like this made sense and was something he should do and just really part of the culture and the way he wanted to live life. But I think one of the takeaways that I had from it as we pivot into that conversation is just how much risk someone could take, like really serious, severe, like life-threatening risk, and quite honestly get away with it. Like he put himself like in this incredible danger time and time again and had like, I don't know, just emotional fortitude to not like freak out. Like if I was ever in any one of the circumstances we saw him in video, I would be having a panic attack, like just overwhelmed with the situation and like, what have I gotten myself into? And I'm going to die. And just like, I think everything would shut down. I would just be emotionally overwhelmed. And he certainly was not that way. He was very relaxed, very chill, very calm, and handled all of this just methodically, diligently. Like it just did not affect him in any way. And you would think that anybody persisting in this sort of activity, they're just going to die almost immediately. Like you don't dare go and take something so risky because it's just lights. You're going to mess up so soon and you'll just die. And, the sad reality is he only did die from these activities, but it wasn't to some extent not fully within his control. It wasn't because of a mistake apparently on his part. It looks like an avalanche had taken place. And
Yeah, it was an avalanche and he was on his way down.
right.
He had made it up. He didn't fall. It was a freak accident and it's a real shame. Just one of the things that kind of like stick out in my mind is what you talked about him, being so cool about it. And here we are talking about the risk of it all and how, massive it must have been. But in his mind, it always seemed in the movie that he probably believed, and maybe in some ways it wasn't as much of a risk as we might perceive it to be, right? Because he had that experience and he had that mental preparation and he had done it. It's not like he got up one morning and just went to El Capitan or went to one of these other amazing mountains that he climbed up, right? That, he had worked up to that his whole life. And this is really all that he did. And one of the filmmakers, one of their quotes was just letting go and focusing on what you really want to do. That's what I take from Mark. And it kind of made me think of what would happen if you did that in business.
Yeah.
What would the results be if you allowed yourself to be as calm and collected and acknowledge the risks, understand them and prepare for them, but then throw away the ropes
Yeah.
and say, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no kidding. It was just shocking to me to see really how much risk he was taking, yet how long he persevered in that. And I think we all naturally, we have a risk aversion, they say, the psychologists within our field, but human beings, we just have this very strong risk aversion and for good reason. I mean, from at least an evolutionary perspective, the sustainability or sustenance of life is choosing some risk to take and some not to take. And ultimately, they say genetically, we kind of become left with the people who are a little more conservative or careful and cautious in their actions because they don't necessarily lead to you dying. So it's just like it's in our nature as a result of all these cumulative decisions over time to be more careful. And that there's good reason to do that. I certainly wouldn't advocate that we just throw caution to the wind. But seeing a movie like this and seeing a gentleman and his life and his testament like this, it really kind of shed a new light of what you're willing to step into the door and take risk and not be overwhelmed by the fear of something going bad or going wrong, or at least building your confidence, building your skill set, becoming better, and moving yourself along. Like, what can you accomplish? As you'll see in the movie, if you watch it, peaks at like the most really inopportune times. And I'm sure there was just like an adrenaline rush for him. Like, this was about what can I conquer to some extent, I would think, or like at least what can I accomplish for myself? Because he would just be pulling off feats that were just really unbelievable. And people are just mouth gaping of like, what is this guy doing? Like, you wouldn't dare, even in a community of people who are risk takers, he's taking risk to a whole other level. But even the risk takers are like, I don't know. Like, you should probably pull this back a little bit, Marc-Andre. I don't know about this. Like, what do you think about that? Like, I mean, he really pushed the envelope, don't you think, Andrew, to the limit? It's in terms of his willingness to just say, like, look, I mean, this is just, I'm going to live my life this way, and I'm not going to hold myself back just because it could be a little scary.
Yeah, there was the one part in the movie where he had, I think it was down in Patagonia, and I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but even for him, we were able to see how he handled a failure, a quote unquote failure. He had made an attempt and, it didn't turn out the way he had planned it to. And most of the people around him said, okay, well, I guess I'll be getting on a plane. But that's not what happened, right? He just went at it again and really again to everyone's amazement and wound up really probably exceeding his own expectations of what he was capable of. And I think what you said is true, that there had to be a lot of that desire to test his own limits and test his own capabilities and see what was possible for him. So the risk was kind of like part of that.
And so in testing his limits, I think this is what was like, I mean, what he was doing, folks, again, like he was dangling one-handed without ropes on the side of a mountain with one axe in the rock face and the ice, thousands of feet up, and was so cool and collect with it. Like, this notion of testing your limits, we tend to have a response internally within ourselves, certainly myself for sure, to risk where you're like, oh boy, it's getting to feel like a little much. I'm getting on nerve. This is stressful, it's anxiety inducing. And we limit ourselves, unfortunately, if we allow it to happen. We limit ourselves to not doing as much as what we could do. And so this notion of like testing your limits, he was all about it. Like, yeah, let's do it. I think I can do that. I've got the skill set. I've got the confidence. I've been rock climbing. Let's take this on. Let's see what I can accomplish. And wasn't holding himself back. And that was really like eye-opening and inspiring. Like, I walked away feeling that's just remarkable. You've got a quote from the movie here, Andrew. What did you want to share about kind of testing your limits? It looks like in some of our own notes, something about facing your fears and overcoming fears.
Okay. Well, this is from another alpinist, actually, by the name of Jimmy Chin. And there's another quite a famous climbing movie. I think it's called Free Solo. And Jimmy Chin was the videographer of that, him and his wife. And he's quite an accomplished alpinist in his own right, having, I think, survived like 4 or 5 avalanches.
Wow.
So, yeah, hard to kill this guy.
There you go. Yeah. Tough bugger.
They're going to be an action movie. He's like the real life Jason Statham or something. But he said, you learn that failure is an absolute necessity to growth, and it has taught me how to look at failures as lessons. People are so afraid to fail, but in climbing, it is a process of failures. You try something hard and then you fail, and then you come back again and again and get stronger, better, smarter, more efficient at how you approach it so that you can succeed. So, pretty obviously he's saying, look, failure is a part of growth. Without risk, you would never have failure. And if you don't fail, you can't grow, right? And you can't fail if you don't take on risk as part of the bargain. So these people in this sphere where they are so surrounded by very real life and death pursuits, right? You're on the side of the mountain. At any one moment, things can take a turn south. So they're very an eye-to-eye level with their own mortality. And the other part of that, this growth and really deep understanding of intentionality. And Ben, you talked about that cool and calm, collected way that Marc-Andre would go up these rock faces, as did the other climbers that talked about him. And like, for me, it's that intentionality in the pursuit of climbing these rocks and in the pursuit of creating a business that is the way that you manage risk and you use risk to achieve your own goals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody who's pursuing, this activity knows that it's dangerous. Like, they know it's full of risk. Like, I mean, that's part of the thrill they are pushing themselves to the limits. And I'm sure there's a bit of an adrenaline rush. It just adds to the accomplishment to know that, look what I've pulled off, what I was able to accomplish. And just like this boost of confidence of like, if I can summit a mountain, in this way, like what else would hold me back? Like if a mountain can't hold me back, I mean, what would hold you back? It's really just simply remarkable. But it's just like the whole manner of life with Marc Andre, with the Alpinist of just like, this is how I want to live. Like I'm not going to live my life constantly held back. You had made a comment here, Andrew, ago about people are afraid to fail. Like it was like a choice, an intentional decision on his part to say, I'm not going to live my life afraid to fail. Like I'm not going to spend every day in fear of failing today. I'm going to go do what I want to do. And if I want to go climb mountains, and if that's what I want to do today, which is by and large what he did do, I mean, like there was nothing conventional about Marc Andre's life. The typical career path of like, go to school, get good grades, go into college, get a good job, good advance within a company. None of that was of interest to him in any way. He's like, I like being outdoors. I like climbing. I like being out in this open space. I'm just going to climb. That's what I'm going to do today. And I'll find some way to feed myself later on or make a few bucks but I'm just not going to be held back by these conventions of what success or failure are. I'm going to enjoy my life on the day to day that I have it and just be thankful that I have this day. Like that was what was being communicated to me, at least. What about you? I mean, what did you see and kind of, because his life was so way off the charts different from what you would typically see of maybe someone else that you might interact with, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, he's down, in Patagonia and he's standing around the kitchen and like the night before that, he's going to go on one of those serious climbs. And he's just, he's got a bottle of beer and a big hunk of blue cheese. He's talking about it. He's like, the night that you go out, you got to have what you would want as your last dinner. Because when you go out into the mountains, it might be that, right? And to have that in your face and just to be confronted with that on a day-to-day basis, it's got to change you, right? And I think that what you said is true, that as a culture, we are conditioned genetically to be more conservative, right? Like the dude that tried the mushroom the first time did not
Right.
pass down his genes, right? Like
Yeah, right.
the guy in the front of the line doesn't always make it back.
Right.
So we are programmed to be a little bit more cautious. And I think as time goes on, even more so. That rebellious gene has really been kind of bred out of us in a lot of ways. But from Red Bull's website, I guess they were a sponsor of the movie. They're like, the life and talent of Andre Leclerc are captured in a new documentary. Rather than being just another climbing flick, it provides an insight to a better way of living. And there's your real thing, right? They want you to take away this philosophical idea to it. And for us, as far as entrepreneurship and the things that we talk about, we also, I think, believe that it is a better way of living, taking on a little bit more risk, not following that 9 to 5, and hopefully designing these businesses with more intention to them to create a kind of life. We might not be out, scaling mountains, but hopefully we are doing something that provides us with at least a modicum of freedom that we could maybe do something like that.
Yeah, that notion of freedom really does stick out because to play it safe means you live your life in a kind of a protected, constrained capacity, and you don't go outside those constraints for the reasons of it provides safety. We don't want to take these risks of failing because, well, we want to keep things safe. We want to know the tried and true and the trusted. And at the end of the day, it's hard. It's hard dealing with failure. Like it's not easy to continue to deal with that. And if you are now living life outside of certain constraints, you will fail. Like if you're going to start taking risk, and we certainly would encourage you to do so, and we think, yeah, you need to do so to some extent. Living entirely safely is just not, at least from a wealth accumulation arrangement, is going to be the least profitable way to go without question. And quite frankly, probably going to just leave a lot on the table. But if you are going to take risk, I mean, probably a really good way to interpret and understand risk means you're going to fail. It's not really possible to take these risks and not fail. It's just simply part of risk taking. It's part of doing stuff that is unsafe. It is not tried and true. It's unknown. And part of doing this means you have to start coming to terms and becoming okay with failure and not see it as this end. Like, well, if I failed, it's all over. Like, well, no, I mean, there's still life. Life goes on. Life moves on. These are learning opportunities. And maybe not interpret this as so personally. We can definitely have, maybe through conditioning, where we're inclined to think that if I fail, there's something wrong with me when there isn't anything wrong with you. It's just simply part of taking risks. Like, it's not possible to take risk and not fail. Like, it would be really, I would say, just completely impossible. But we do have aversion in us to failing. It's not just simply talk about taking risks. Like, do you feel like maybe as we've been talking about this, Andrew, that it's just the failure is part of this? Like, it's like coming to terms with failure is just as much a part of risk taking as it is anything else?
I think it's the entire part, right? That mental framing and perception of failure, that's one of those things that kind of stays with you, right? If you wrap your head and your heart and soul into something and you go at it with everything you've got and it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, be a business, a relationship, anything like that, and it goes south, right? And it's really easy to carry that with you, to internalize it, to get stuck in the mire and say, woe is me. And that's none of those emotions, none of those reactions are useful. What you need to do, and I know it's not easy, even in my own life, but you need to get up, suck it up, look around you and say, all right, what happened? And try to learn from it and decide to go again, right? I think also I had seen the other day somewhere talking about this idea that, like, in our society these days, it feels like if you don't do something like forever and stick with it for like years and years, then you're a failure, right? Like, longevity is the mark of any kind of success.
Mm-hmm.
You always see those stats. How, quick does this last? The blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it's okay. Like, even if you start a business and do it for 3 years and then like kind of say, okay, you know what? I don't really like this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. You hang up the towel. That's not failure, because you take something away with it when you move on to the next thing. And as long as you're like learning from what's happening, then I don't think there is failure at that point. And so if you look at it from that perspective, the risks get smaller.
Right. I think it's kind of what you were alluding to really speaks to this notion of it's not just simply failing, it's about getting hurt. And we don't want to get hurt, and we get hurt in so many ways. Maybe we get hurt in our own self-esteem or self-image or what we thought we could accomplish. Maybe we get hurt in a relationship where things didn't pan out the way we thought and we took the risk to love and it kind of came back on our faces. But we get hurt and we don't like getting hurt. I mean, if you go and climb rocks and you fall, you slip and you get bruised up, maybe you break a bone or you tear some skin, like, you're going to get hurt. And so I think part of taking risks is not just simply becoming comfortable with failure or learning how to respond to failure. It's also becoming okay with the fact that I'm probably going to get hurt in this. And that's okay. I think coming to the fact that it's okay to get hurt. Like, I mean, getting hurt can be pretty serious. You can, could be life threatening and could be life ending. I mean, could be life altering. I mean, you could get hurt in ways where maybe you conk your head or something like that. And what life as you know it is no longer the same. But I think we have to pause and just take an evaluation of what life would be if we kept it entirely safe. And we tried not to take any risks. We tried not to fail. We tried not to get hurt. There is this whole show, The Alpinist, with Marc Andre, is almost like a statement against that. Like, what kind of life do you have? Is that really a life any one of us wants to have or be a part of? It's not really compelling to keep everything safe. I mean, we're two entrepreneurs who like, or at least comfortable with taking some risk, maybe not all. I don't think I'm going to be the alpinist one day. Like, I'm not going to probably not take that up as a hobby. Like, that level of risk is just really shocking to me. And I certainly know of other people who have taken more risk in my life. You've got to become comfortable with what risk you are willing to take and what risk you're going to say, I'm going to walk away from. But I don't know, Andrew. I mean, I would imagine that you don't find anything compelling about playing it too safe. What are your thoughts on safety?
I'm bored with it. I've definitely taken a fair number of risks in my personal life and in my professional life and my financial life. I've jumped around from a few different careers, left the country as a young man and still out kind of adventuring a little bit. But there's a Lewis Carroll quote. It's like, in the end, we only regret the chances that we didn't take. And that's what it is. I'm pretty happy at this point that I've taken a lot of those chances that I've wanted to take. And right now, it's nice to be able to look back already and say, look, I took my shots here and there and I gave it my all, and not everything's worked out, of course, but you do learn from that. And I think we've talked a lot about the kind of softer side of this, but there is the more hard, technical, financial side of all this. Hopefully, how do you set yourself up for taking these kinds of risks? And I think that, again, that idea of intentionality and like preparation is everything,
Yeah.
and the plan is nothing, Like, prepare your ass off, get everything ready. But then if the plan, forgive me, if the plan doesn't work out well, that's when you got to say, okay, I'm going to either pivot, I'm going to be flexible, I'm going to see what else I can do. And, not knowing what you're doing, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, well, that's the only part of it that's worth doing, because that's the exciting part, going in every day and learning something.
Right. I mean, it's funny. I mean, we work as financial planners, and yet I think both you and I know that plans are kind of worthless, right? I mean, we prepare, but plans are just, well, they are a plan of attack. This is how we think things are going to go. This is how we're going to respond to them. But what it really is preparing, and then a willingness to pivot, and then a confidence in pivoting, knowing at what time maybe the route that you had thought to go back to the rock climbing arrangement, it wasn't the right route. We got new information, and what seemed to be making sense doesn't make sense any longer. And knowing when to pivot.
Or the weather rolled in, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Things have changed. Things have changed.
Things are out of your hand. It's an act of nature, an act of God, whatever you want. And like, just now you've got new information in front of you. And the beautiful thing about being a financial planner is you get to see hundreds of people's lives unfold in front of you, and you're the one that they're coming to.
Yeah.
Weather rolls in, right? Someone has a great job and they think everything's going their way, and then they lose their job. And it's like, well, now what do I do? Well, you figure it out, right? You make a new plan. You start planning again.
It's really a development of judgment to know when to keep pushing and when to stay with the plan, like stick with the game plan. Like, we're not giving up on this. This is actually what we need to continue with, and knowing when to pivot and saying, actually this plan isn't, it was a good attempt. It's time to change or make some adjustments. I would say in a lot of life, it's like the critical piece, like knowing when to pivot. That's the critical piece. And there's really, in the work that we do, it's helping clients and helping ourselves figure out those pivot points of when's it time to make a change, or when's it time to hold course and hold steady and keep going on with what you're doing. So this has just been a fascinating conversation. God rest Marc-Andre, really a remarkable individual. Really, you should watch the movie if you have a moment, if anything else, as a tribute to his life and really like the lessons he left behind to teach us. Because he was a risk taker who was willing to kind of put it all out on the line. And quite frankly, he didn't live a terribly long life. I think he passed in his late 20s, early 30s.
25.
Was it 25? Wow. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, he was young, man. He was young. It's a shame.
It is a shame, but then you have kind of this genetic. I had mixed feelings on it. There's one part of like blown away with the risk this young man's taking, and on the other hand, I'm like, well, there's a reason why his genes didn't persist, and he's such he's such a unicorn, like this is what happens.
By the end of the movie, you're like, oh yeah, I guess.
If you take too much risk, this is what will happen. I mean, I think there is. You can't take too much risk. Boy, I mean, his response and coolness to it all, like that was really remarkable, and something we haven't talked much about, but we'll have to maybe just say for another episode is. Taking risk does impact you, like emotionally, even like in the world of business, it affects you. And so like learning to cope with those impacts is probably one of the hardest and most challenging aspects of entrepreneurship. Like the rational side of a lot of this is really fairly straightforward. It's still getting up every day in the face of these risks, in the face of possibly failing and or knowing that maybe you will fail. Like, I mean, it's going to happen. And just being okay with that. Like we have just such a strong response. I certainly do to the potential of failing, but it holds you back. And so you're like pushing the limits, you're pushing the envelope, you're stretching yourself, and you got to learn how to manage your emotions. I think just a tribute that I have to Marc-Andre is he did an incredible job of managing his emotions in the face of risk. Like you really need to just see the movie just to watch that alone. Like watch how he managed himself and was just so cool, calm, and collect, and like terribly scary and dangerous circumstances didn't seem to get him unraveled in any way. What do you think? You have any additional thoughts to share on that matter, Andrew?
No, I think you've done a really, really good job. And I've seen more agitated people at the DMV.
Right.
He was up there and just so in the moment and so focused on the task ahead of him. And I think also your emotions and allowing yourself to continue to make good decisions is really important. So.
Yeah, well, everyone take a moment, watch The Alpinist, watch Marc-Andre, pay some tribute to his life. He really has left us something to teach us. And hopefully this episode has helped to shed some light on entrepreneurship and risk-taking, and it's going to move you along in your pathway to pushing into the unknown, taking that risk, and ultimately bettering yourself in the process. And, that's what we want. We certainly want to see you bettering yourself. But I tell you what, even if you don't better yourself, at least being able to look back at your life and say, you know what, I did go for it. I did take those risks and living life without any regrets. that's a life worth living too. Even if it doesn't all turn out the way we want it to, we'll look back on our life and say, I still took those risks and I'm happy that I did and I'm proud of it. A lot of people would say that's more than enough. So until next time, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll have another great episode coming your way. Thanks for listening. I hope you've had as much fun as we did. If you'd like to learn more about any of the subjects we spoke about, please visit our website for show notes, links, and more. Hit like, subscribe, or whatever button you've got in front of you to show some love. Remember, the information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Remember what Teddy Roosevelt said about the person who strives greatly. If he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Until next time, keep striving.
Thanks again, and be well.